This week on The Big Show, with all the success the superhero films have enjoyed, it would make sense that there would be some pushback. In promoting his new book, Cinema Speculation, director Quentin Tarantino compares the popularity of superhero films to 1960s musicals. Early this year, Martin Scorsese famously claimed the superhero films are more like amusement park rides instead of proper cinematic experiences, which attracted criticism from a lot of Marvel fans as well as other industry figures. Charles Kirkland, do these legendary directors have a legitimate point? Plus, the honorees for the 5th annual Celebration of Black Cinema were announced earlier this week. We will reveal this year's distinguished nominees, and also we'll review Armageddon Time, Causeway, and the Banshees of Inisherin. We'll have all that and more on episode, I think it's 512, of Keeping It Real with FilmGordon. Let's go. All right, and welcome to the latest episode of Keeping It Real with FilmGordon. I am Tim Gordon. I am joined by Charles Kirkland Jr. Charles, what's going on, man?
Hey, what's happening? I had a wonderful day today. You know, Drake dropped a new album, and I got to interview a few people for a conversation. So I'm happy to be here.
Well, that's good, man. That's good, man. So I have been watching a slew of movies. You know, I feel like I'm a movie DJ. So whatever movie or idea comes to my head, I can pull a movie up and watch it. So, Charles, I am watching what has been described as Samuel L. Jackson's favorite blaxploitation film right now. I did not know this. I have seen this film before, but I wanted to rewatch it. And the film is none other than 1975's The Candy Tangerine Man. Wow. I can't even, look, I got no words, man, for watching this movie. None. It's just entertaining. Is on. I've seen a lot of these films from that era, man. I'm not comparing one to the other. This one is just, I don't know, man. I just think that you've heard the phrase, I think WOL used to say information is power. Sometimes in movies, you just got to watch a lot of movies, man. And then that helps inform you to know the difference between stuff that's good versus stuff that's not. Or stuff that's trashy versus something that's entertaining and trashy, which is what this movie is. You can see it in the background that I have it on pause because if I let it run, we would get some sort of a warning from my good friends at YouTube, like, hey, what's up, man? It's a copyright issue. No, it's not. It's not playing. It's just frozen in the background. But yeah, Charles, man, I'm glad that you had a good day today. What else has been going on with you? You good?
I'm just trying to figure out what inspired you to watch The Candy Tangerine Man again. But I myself, I've been actually, ironically, binging some Marvel movies. I watched Captain America: Winter Soldier, which led me into Civil War, and then uh, uh, Infinity War. So.
Okay, well, you said what inspired me. I watched Cleopatra Jones, and then its sequel, Cleopatra Jones and the Casino of Gold, which I've never seen until this afternoon. The first one is better. If you don't need the Casino of Gold, just stay with the 1973 Tamara Dobson classic. She's a woman who, honestly, if Pam Grier is looked on as iconic, had she not gotten sick, she and Pam Grier, who were friends in real life, she would have been as large as Pam Grier. To me, 6'2", statuesque. Cleopatra Jones is a really good film with action in it. In a way, no disrespect to Pam Grier, but that's a much better portrayal of a woman who's kicking some butt than Foxy Brown, Coffee, and some of those other movies. But that's just me. But yeah, man, so that's what inspired me. I've been watching movies over the last several days, man. I think I watched, what is her name? Warren Beatty's sister, Shirley MacLaine. Watched Two Mules for Sister Sarah. I watched what was the other movie that she did? So I've just, I've been sitting around, Charles, and if I think of certain people or certain genres, I try to watch, a couple of films and trying to expand my filmography, man. So that's kind of what I've been doing. So that was the inspiration.
Okay.
All right, man. Well, let's jump into this thing, man. I think the big story that was circulating today, and I don't know if you've ever watched it. I think I watched this show the first two seasons and then I tapped out. But Westworld got canceled today, and it must have been a surprise because it's the leading story in the trades today. It's like Westworld canceled. They just had their season 4 finale, and I think they were trying to come back, Charles, with season 5. And HBO was like, no, we good. Stop right there. So, have you ever watched Westworld?
Actually, I watched the whole first season, and I've been meaning to catch up on it and Yellowstone, as a matter of fact, both of them. And so now I'm really interested because I want to see how season 4 ended. I'm sure that no one anticipated that this was happening. That I don't think season 4 brought anything to a conclusion. So I wonder what they're going to do. Maybe they'll make a movie somewhere down the line to wrap it up. But yeah, it was a big shock to a lot of people that they pulled the plug on Westworld.
Yeah, man. Well, man, like I said, man, I think we spent a lot of time on this show talking about superhero stuff because, of course, I think that what Marvel is doing is kind of amazing. You've heard me say this. I've said it with our audience. Of course, I wasn't planning on talking about Marvel today because I knew we were going to talk about Black Panther next week. So we're gonna spend a lot of time talking about their 30th film. But I just thought that Quentin Tarantino's point, and I also remembered, as you heard in the tease, Martin Scorsese talking about this. There's a lot of pushback, man, with these movies, man. And I'm trying to find some of the quotes from Tarantino, which I thought was really, really interesting, man, because along with, Martin Scorsese, these are gentlemen who are 50 plus, right? So they're coming from a different time and a different era and a different way that they make and process movies and entertainment. We've talked on the show several times, man, about, these movies just take up a lot of oxygen, man. I mean, you talk to people who are actors and they will tell you that theaters are full of superhero films. And it's not just a Marvel thing. We just talked about Black Adam a couple of weeks ago. You've got all the things that Warner Brothers is doing with superhero films. Um, they're highly profitable. I don't know. They're entertaining to me. I think that for this generation, um, it's a very interesting question, Charles. And so I found the quote. He said that the directors of the MCU are simply hired hands, and he never wants to. He can't put his personality on the film. I remember we had a conversation when Ava DuVernay had a meeting with Kevin Feige like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and they gave her a pick at that time whether she could direct Black Panther or Captain Marvel. And after they went back and forth, Ava was like, "I'm out. I can't do it." So there'd been a lot of people, Charles, who look at these movies, and I guess since they've already kind of planned out the MCU, and I think Warner Brothers now by bringing in James Gunn and I forget the gentleman's name who's going to be co-president or the Kevin Feige of DC now. That you plan these things out, man. There's a strategy. You try to tie the films together. You try to design that quilt that we talk about that Marvel has been so successful in doing. And there is a certain, I don't want to use the word cookie cutter, but there's a certain formula that is used in making these movies. And these movies don't really require, Steven Spielberg to make one. You don't see Spike Lee making a film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You don't see, Christopher Nolan, which is really funny because I was going to bring Christopher Nolan up. Christopher Nolan did his own thing, which he didn't tie in, that was kind of independent, a 3-story Batman franchise that he created. But Charles, I mean, am I off base about, when we talk first of all about the role of a director, and we understand how important that role is, but I think that role to a certain extent is minimized when you're talking about a film telling stories about Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Iron Man, and all of these folks. Would that am I on point here as a person who spent a lot of time reading these comic books?
To an extent, you are correct that they have to fit into a certain style, but there have been directors who have not fit into the style, and I think to their detriment. I think when they got Chloe Zhao to do the Eternals, she tried to stick to her own style of storytelling, which did not work for the Marvel universe and its fans. So there's a certain amount of expectation that goes with being a superhero director. And now there are people who've broken the constraints, like a Joe and Anthony Russo, who actually crafted a very different style that they put into the Marvel universe, which is also why their films kind of stick out from the others in the universe. And they've gone on to do things outside of the universe that are additionally successful. So sometimes it comes across as a little bit of haterade, but why would Martin Scorsese want to do a superhero film anyway? I couldn't imagine anyone enlisting him to do something along those lines, as far as what the MCU and even the DCU is doing right now. But I mean, we've had a lot of people who've done successful superhero movies. We got Richard Banner, who did the first Thor. We had, and even if you look back in the 70s when Richard Donner was doing Superman, I mean, there have been successful directors who stepped into the superhero genre. You mentioned Christopher Nolan, who've done quite well. And so right now, he's right. It's all kind of formulaic style of directing. But there are opportunities for people to step outside if they can make it profitable. And that's the whole point. Is Marvel is in it about making great movies, profitable movies, not actually looking at films that are going to be Oscar nominated, of course, but they're giving people what they want, kind of like what Tyler Perry did in his universe. So yeah, it is what it is.
Well, I was going to say, it's funny because you talk about Kenneth Branagh's first Thor, which was not really well received. You talk about Chloe Zhao and the Eternals, again, a film not really well received. And I guess I'm speaking as a guy who's done this a long time, but when you're looking at, what these guys are doing, despite the fact that we know Ryan Coogler did Fruitvale Station and Creed before he came to the MCU, right? So we know that there's a certain style of films that he can make, right? I don't even get the feeling. I think that with Black Panther, especially the first one, that Coogler was able to implement some things that were near and dear to him as a guy who grew up in the Bay. He took the character or the story and had it based in Oakland, or had parts of it based in Oakland, had a tie-in. So mm-hmm. I think there is room for improvisation, right, in some of these movies. But I think if a director tried to come in, so like Spike Lee is a good one. Let's just reimagine. You gave Spike Lee an opportunity to direct in the MCU. Spike Lee has a certain style of storytelling that I think he could do it, because we've seen him make like big budget films like The Inside Man, where he I'm not gonna say he dialed down his spikeness, but it was a real big budget film. It was not one that he wrote. He was able to come in there and direct it. And he had Denzel, who's his dude, Chiwetel Ejiofor, and a bunch of other folks in there, and he made it work, right? Jodie Foster made it work. But could you imagine Spike Lee wanting to do a Spike Lee film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Charles, I don't know if that would work, man. I mean, with all of the flourishes that Spike likes to use, the dolly shots, and I mean, it would be funny to imagine it. It's the same thing with Steven Spielberg. Imagine a Spielberg film in the MCU where Spielberg likes to tell these inspirational stories. I mean, could he do it? Sure, he could do it. But I don't think that those are your go-to guys. And Martin Scorsese, all joking aside, he is he's a master director, right? I've watched Scorsese make stuff, brutal crime stuff like the Goodfellas, Casinos, Mean Streets, to films like The Last Temptation of Christ, The Age of Innocence. Scorsese can do damn near anything with a film, but I don't know if he would have the patience or if he would be able to put his imprint on one of those stories and make it his own, Charles. I mean, so I'm gonna just throw that to you for the last thing, kind of what I just kind of went through. What are your thoughts on that?
Scorsese could do a one of the Marvel darker films like they were getting into with Blade and Ghost Rider and something like that. Those are kind of things that might fall in his wheelhouse where he can actually have. Oh my goodness! My daughter's on television right now, so I just
congratulations, man.
I would stop for a second.
So while Charles is stopping for a second, I'm going to kind of continue with my train of thought. And Charles is not paying attention, so I have time to set this up. One of the things that Quentin Tarantino talked about in his interview was the fact that he compared the superhero films of this time to like the musicals of the 1960s. So of course, Charles, as a guy who sort of likes musicals, I don't remember watching a bunch of them because I was a baby in the 1960s. But it reminded me, I was like, well, what is he talking about with these movies? And then when I started looking at some of them, I don't think it's a good parallel, and I'll explain why in a second. But in the 1960s, man, there were musicals like Paint Your Wagon. Paint Your Wagon I've never seen, but I've heard this was a film that lost so much money it almost killed, not almost, it did kill the musical toward the end of the decade. You had other films like My Fair Lady, Funny Girl, Dr. Dolittle. These are all movies in the 60s, man. The Music Man. Yeah, man. The musical, the decade started, of course, with West Side Story, which was like the huge musical. And then, of course, much like what Hollywood does, when something is successful, everybody goes, get me one of those. So Bye Bye Birdie. How to Succeed in Business Without Even Trying. Irma La Duce. There were just so many friggin' musicals in the 1960s, man, that musicals now come along, Charles, and we have one or two, annually, but nothing like the output of what musicals represented during that time period and how they were so out of step. So you think about everything that was going on in the country in the 1960s, man. This young Catholic president, you've got civil rights movements, you got all of these things happening, Dr. King, the different assassinations and stuff, and the studios are rolling out Paint Your Wagon.
Okay. Look, I've listened to you diss the '60s musicals, and I will come to the defense. The Music Man is still one of my favorite films of all time. I grew up in the '60s watching these musicals, Seven Brides or Seven Brothers, Oklahoma, all these things, man. Paint Your Wagon. Yeah, I've seen it a couple times. It's not my favorite. But there's a lot of good. I mean, I won't have decent movies that came out in this musicals, and the whole purpose of a musical, because nobody goes through life just singing songs when they're walking through the world. It's supposed to transport you to another world, another level, something outside of what you're used to. Nobody just walks around and sings a song and has a band. When I'm Gonna Get You Sucker played, that was a joke that he had a band playing behind him walking, because that doesn't happen in real life. So yeah, the '60s were out of touch with what the musicals were out of touch with what was reality. But the musical is out of touch with reality. Even in Chicago, you don't have people walking around singing, and that's more recent. Singing all that jazz, come on, it doesn't happen in real life. So sometimes people have to come down off of themselves. Scorsese, I know he's probably a little salty about the wave of these Marvel movies and comparing them to the musicals of 1960. Well, they were profitable too back in the day. So is it the fact that these guys are making money and you're not right now? Come on. You're a master filmmaker, Scorsese. Just live in your world. Don't try to trash somebody else's work.
First of all, it was Quentin Tarantino that made that,
Oh yeah, but you said
not Martin
Scorsese too.
Scorsese. And I would say that he has a fair point to a certain extent that the musicals, they had so many of them during that time period, and the industry was changing, right? So if you study film history, you will know that 1967 is a very kind of line drawn in the sand for the 1960s in cinema, because you had a year where there were films like we talked about Sidney Poitier. How the industry was even changing for him. He's making Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, and a year earlier, you got 2 years earlier, there's the civil rights movement. You've got the Black Panther Party. You got assassinations happening, and what it meant to be black is changing, right? And so they're looking at Sidney Poitier, going, "Come on, man." Now we liked In the Heat of the Night, and To Serve with Love was another one of those films that Sidney got pushed back on. You also had in '67 films like The Graduate, Bonnie and Clyde. I mean, so cinema was changing. You had the Wild Bunch coming up. You had what was the other? Once Upon a Time in the West. I mean, so films where you had a new, younger generation of filmmakers who were making these really gritty movies. And then that would lead into the 1970s, where Spielberg, Lucas, Scorsese, De Palma, Coppola, my guy who did The Landlord, and Being There, I forget what his name is right now, but you had a wave of all these new directors that were coming in. So to what I was saying about Tarantino, I think he's right, at least half right, about this explosion of superhero films being like the musicals of that generation or that decade. But where he's wrong is that as the 60s went on, despite Charles growing up and loving these musicals, they weren't making that much money. But these superhero films are making billions of dollars, man. So it's a very different analogy. And for an example, I'm just going to go out on a limb. They're calling for 175 next weekend for the movie that we're going to review. That movie's probably going to open at 2, maybe 205, 210. I don't know. I mean, so these movies make major dollars for the studios that release them. So it's a very different argument. But Charles, I will agree that even among our colleagues, other film critics, people talk about that, these films, and I don't see any slowing down with any of them being made, that, with the technology improving and storytelling improving, I don't think these films are going away anytime soon. But man, the explosion of these movies, man, have kind of gotten rid of what I call the mid-level films that used to be able to be released and live in theaters, because there's no space for those movies anymore. Because, for instance, next weekend, how many screens is this movie going to be on, Charles? 4,000?
Probably, at least. Yeah.
4,000. And we'll be on 4,000 screens for a minute. It's not like it's going to be a couple of weeks and it's out. It's Thanksgiving coming up, man. So I kind of see it both ways, that I think there is a little jealousy and envy from certain people who are looking at these grosses on these movies, but they don't see them as being really, really challenging movies, that they're all part of a structure that's always confined within these worlds that they live in. So they're not really challenging films, but the audience can't get enough of them, man. They're highly entertained by them. So it's one of those situations that bears watching, Charles. The longer we've been doing this show, we see evolution and change from year to year in our industry. The pandemic was another one that came along and really changed how we even view films now. I mean, films are not back to the degree that we were pre-pandemic. We've lost a lot of theaters, even though they're starting to build some more back. Film studios aren't releasing movies in the ways they used to, and then there's more films coming through streaming services, and the window of theatrical to streaming at home. That window is shortened. So Charles, there's a lot to chew on when we talk about what these films represent and what they mean.
And I'm also going to say this because you mentioned that they're going forth being even more fruitful. I think we're starting to reach a saturation point. I think this latest phase with Marvel and all the Disney Plus stuff and the stuff that they're doing, that a lot of people are starting to be more selective in which films are going to see, and I think Eternals may have been the start of it. That not every one of these movies is knocking it out of the park. So when you have what was it, Miss Marvel on Disney Plus, and people are like, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. So we're getting to a point now, I think, and this is bad for DC because they're just starting to get online with all the potential that they have. I think Black Adam was a decent film, but people now have so much that they have to be selective. They can't. They're not going to be able to go to 6 movies a year, and every other month there's a superhero film that they were going to rush out and go see. Some now, like we've had a whole bunch of movies in this latest phase of Marvel that have been underwhelming, and if they do that for the next phase, because I think we're past the hump where the films are actually going to start meaning something. But if you come out with your next phase and you have a couple of dogs like you did before, it may start cooling this market a bit.
Yeah, and part of that shift that you talk about started because we were in the middle of the pandemic and stories were pushed back and delayed. So they did lose some momentum and they're trying to pick it back up. And I think a film like the one coming out next week, I keep saying it that way, Charles, because I don't really want to start talking about it now. But we'll talk about it a lot next week, which is why it's the film for next week, man. All right, so, man, I'm going to pivot on to our next talking point, man. And a couple of days ago, it was announced the lineup for the 5th annual celebration of Black cinema. And before I continue, I will just be transparent and tell people that both Charles and I belong to the Critics' Choice Association. And even more transparency, I'm on the committee for the celebration of Black cinema. So I'm invested to a certain degree in order to talk about this. I've been to every one of these events. I'll be in LA in about 3 weeks for the 5th annual. So I've seen them all. This year, Bill Bellamy, my homeboy from Newark, New Jersey, is going to be the host. Taking what is her name? Claus, Niecy Nash, who hosted last year. So this year, Charles, among the honorees, they're honoring Berry Gordy for his career as a producer for all of those films that Motown had in the 1970s. Where Lady Sings the Blues, Mahogany, The Wiz, Bingo Longs, Traveling All-Stars, and Motor Kings, all these movies, which actually, Charles, I'm going to watch that a little later on. I haven't seen that one in a minute.
Right.
They're also honoring Angela Bassett. They're honoring Michael B. Jordan. Kid Cudi is being honored. Don't know that. I don't know about that one. Nico Annan from P Valley.
Well, Kid Cudi is being honored because he had that film that just released on Netflix. I talked to you about. Intergalactic, yeah.
Yeah, that was good.
So, yeah.
They're also honoring writer-director Elegance Bratton. I'm not sure, Charles, if you've seen The Inspection yet. I saw that in Toronto. It's really, really good. Quinta Brunson's going to be in the house as an honoree. Danielle Deadweiler from Till. Ayo, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, Etta Beery, who played in The Bear. Remember I was telling you about The Bear?
Oh, yeah.
The sister of The Bear? Yeah, she was really, really good. Brian Tyree Henry is getting honored, and I'm laughing because Charles doesn't watch Atlanta, but on the latest episode or the penultimate episode of Atlanta, because next week is the series finale, but the episode that he did today that was all Brian Tyree Henry, Charles, at some point you got to go and find Atlanta and watch it when the series is over, man. It's really, Donald Glover has a very interesting viewpoint on how he tells stories and what he's done over the course of like 40 episodes of this show. It's pretty memorable. That was a good showcase for Brian Tyree Henry. Quincy Isaiah from Winning Time: The Rise of the Lakers Dynasty, the guy who played Magic Johnson in the show, he's going to be honored. Jonathan Majors is going to be in the house because of Devotion. Gina Prince Bythewood, of course, the Woman King, and writer-director Nigyatu Jusu, who is, I think she's with I'm not sure exactly which movie. Oh, she's with The Nanny. She's the writer-director of The Nanny. And then they're gonna have the cast of the Wonder Years all gonna be there. So that's gonna be pretty tight, man, next month. Charles, I know you and I talked about this. You have not been to any of these Celebration of Black Cinema events, man. They're really nice, man. I like them because, and I know CCA spotlights all the different cultures, right? So like, I think tonight they're doing the celebration of Asian American, Asian American culture. So they're doing that one. And then I know maybe several days before the celebration of Black cinema is a celebration of kind of Latinx. So they're going to be celebrating that culture. So I think these shows are really well done because they really spotlight a thing and they kind of like double down on it. Sort of like, not necessarily comparison to what we're doing at the Black Reel Awards, because the Black Reel Awards is an award show, right? So these are just like special honor shows, which is nothing wrong with them. I just think they're cool. I mean, I support them. I enjoy them. But you gotta support them. You're on the programming team. I'm on the team, man. But again, we've been having conversation because I think every year around this time, our team, and Charles is on the team, we get a little antsy because it's like you sort of know or have an idea of what films you think will be nominated. But then it becomes the numbers game, like how many people are getting nominated. And Black Panther had a record a couple of years ago. I think back in 2019, it got 17 nominations, Charles, which at the time was a record, which has since been broken by The Harder They Fall last year, which was nominated for 20. So I have no idea how this year is going to shake out. And I think the biggest reason is the success of the Woman King, right? So, of course, you're looking at Viola Davis, Lashana Lynch, Thuso, I can't even pronounce Thuso's last name, who played Naniska's daughter in Woman King. Now, if you sit at home going, wait a minute, man, why are you telling me? Because the movie came out 3 months ago. If you haven't seen The Woman King by now, shame on you. Come on, man. You get about 2 weeks. Charles, you get about 2 weeks, man. And then after that, we telling everything, man. If you haven't seen it.
Especially after we do a review and tell you to go see it, and it's 3 months and you haven't seen it yet, don't blame us. We already told you.
Well, that's on you. But yeah, so Thuso, I think John Boyega, I'm not sure how much love he's going to get. I think when more people see The Inspection, Gabrielle Union is going to probably be in play. Danielle Deadwyler is in play for Till, which I think she's really great in that. I'm trying to think of who else could possibly be in play, Charles. Am I leaving anybody out that's acting in any of these films? Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot about Nope. Keke Palmer, Daniel Kaluuya, Jordan Peele is going to probably be in play. So it's a very interesting year. And then there's the sleeper film that is being shown to people in small groups and building buzz, and that's Will Smith's film Emancipation. Oh, yeah. He was in Atlanta. I don't know if you saw this, Charles. He was in Atlanta he showed it. Matter of fact, he got invited to Atlanta because he had a screening in LA where it was like Tyler Perry, Dave Chappelle. There was a bunch of people at this screening. So Tyler Perry liked it so much, he invited them to Atlanta and they showed it to some students down there. Will Smith is making the rounds, bro. He showed it to the Lakers. I thought that was funny. He took it in and he had a private screening for the Lakers. And then he was like, Now I'm gonna take it to Philly. I'm gonna show it to the Sixers. I'm like, so you just gonna go from city to city like Oscar Michaud in 2022 and be like, hey, I got this movie. You got to. Hey, Will, if you're watching, look, Charles.
I'm waiting for the DC showing. Come on, bring it on to
I was
Chocolate
gonna
City.
say, hey, Will, if you want to show it to somebody, we got a Black Reel Award Voting Academy. We would love to see Emancipation. I'm just saying, because it's gonna get nominated if it's good. So that's why I said, Charles, we're about 6 weeks out. Nominations will be on December the 15th. We'll have some announcements about who are going to be our presenters to announce it this year, because we always try to find somebody that's new and exciting to spread the word. So, Charles, any last thoughts on the lineup for the 5th annual celebration of Black cinema, which takes place on Monday, December the 5th in Los Angeles?
You know, I've said this to you before, and I'll say it to you again. Stop scheduling it for the first weekend in December. I keep telling you that's my wife's birthday weekend, and so I will always be doing something with her. If y'all just don't want me to be there, just stop inviting me. That's all I'm gonna say. Stop sending me the emails telling me who's gonna be there and how hot it's gonna be, because you put it on the same weekend when I can't come. Stop doing this to me. Stop doing it to me.
First of all, sir,
stop doing it to me. You're on the team.
Messenger.
Huh?
I'm on the team, but I ain't got nothing to do with scheduling. It ain't my event. Like if you want to cry about February the 6th when the Black Reel Awards are happening, you are within your right. I set the date. So I don't set the date for the celebration of Black cinema. I'm just on the team. So it's a very different feeling, but I will express that to the person who's in charge by the name of Sean Edwards, who you know. Matter of fact, you know Sean. Why don't you pick up the phone and call him and take me out of it? I don't have to be the middleman. You got a relationship with Sean. Tell Sean that the date sucks and you want a different date. No comment?
I'll do that. I'll do that.
Yeah. I bet you will. All right, man.
But you and I both know what's going to happen with that one. Oh yeah, I had to hold the phone to my ear for a second.
Look, Charles, nothing's gonna happen. But thanks for playing. All right, man, it's time to review some movies right now. And the irony is that I'm gonna probably be doing the lion's share reviewing because Charles has seen none of these movies. You've seen none of these movies, Charles. All right. Well, let's just
wait. One of them, and so, 1.5 movies.
We're doing Armageddon, Causeway, and the Banshees of Inisherin.
So 1.5.
All right. Now, I will also say before I get started that I came back to WETA earlier this week to do 2 reviews for the first time. It's probably the second time I've been in the building since the pandemic. So it was very strange. And they've now changed it, Charles, that you remember back in the day, it would be Robert Aubrey Davis and me and Travis would kind of like square off over these 2 minutes. And they felt that format didn't work because we didn't have enough time to really kind of dissect and break these movies down. So they came up with a format called Best Bets, where you write a script in advance, they put it in the teleprompter, you kind of stand there. And I'm not gonna say anything negative because I got to check for this, but you gotta stand there, and Charles, and you stand there, and you stand there, and you stand there, and so that was number one. Number two, I learned a very valuable lesson about writing the script because this is the first time I'd ever done it this way, and there's a huge difference, Charles, between the way I write reviews that we put on the site and the way you have to write reviews to deliver them for a program like this. So I discovered that in my writing is very wordy, right? So I'll write 1 paragraph, and it'll be a thought that'll be in 1 paragraph. And they were like, Tim, you got to break this stuff up, because I was almost about to pass out trying to read my own writing. I was like, and I'm going, and then this happened, and then this happened. And he was like, bro, let's put a pause, let's put a period right here. So Charles, to your point, you write reviews, right? Would you agree that if you had to read your reviews out loud in a format that it may not be as easy to read it as it is to write it.
Now I think my writing is pretty smooth. It flows real well. So you flow thought to thought to thought, and then, no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Because I was like, yeah, I know exactly what to do next time. We're just gonna be writing bursts of different sentences because I was like, it's just too much, man. Especially when I did The Whale, man. I was about to fall out. I was like, and Brendan Fraser, and then oh, say, let me get my breath. So having said that, I'm going to start off. I told you we have 3 movies this week: Causeway, The Banshees of Inisherin, and Armageddon Time, which is what I'm going to lead off with. And before I get started, I will just be transparent, right? Because I'm not trying to pull the wool over the audience's eyes. I watched maybe 2/3 of this movie. I didn't see the whole thing because this was the day we were at Middleburg and they had the concert. So I wanted to see the concert. So I ducked out of this movie. Now, Armageddon Time is a coming of age drama written and directed and produced by James Gray, inspired by his upbringing in Queens, New York during the 1980s. The film, of course, stars Anne Hathaway, Jeremy Strong, Banks Repetta, Jalen Webb, and Anthony Hopkins. It was shot in New Jersey. This film, man, and I won't spend a lot of time on this one because I didn't see it all, but from what I saw, and this is really interesting, Charles, because you and I have watched enough films that sometimes there's several different ways that films can work, right? So you think about films as a 3-arc structure, right? So there's a beginning and an end, and then there's a middle. Or you've heard us on this show always talk about first, second, and third acts, right? Third act, right, at the end. So I didn't get to see the third act of this movie, but the first 2 acts I saw, I'll just say this, man. I thought it was a small, wonderfully crafted independent film about a young boy who's growing up in Queens, who is kind of like a kid, right? So when you're a kid, you don't have these limitations of race and class and income and all that stuff. And you only learn all that stuff when you start interacting with other people. And then you kind of are with peer pressure, you're put into certain positions, right? So the character has a friend who's this black kid. Both of them are kind of like these outcasts in kind of elementary school, and they kind of bond to each other because they got something in common. They're at the principal's office, they're acting out. They both have a teacher they can't stand. And as they kind of grow older and they go through their school journey, there's a clear divergence between the two of them. He grows up in a family, a very strong family, where the black kid does not. And so without telling you anymore, you kind of see where that story is going. And then there's the interactions when he goes to the new school that his parents put him in, that the first day, Charles, he shows up and they're having an assembly. And the assembly, you know where I'm going with this, right? You remember this? Right. The assembly is led by Fred Trump, and his wife. And then there was another younger Trump. And I remember I was sitting there with somebody else like, nah, man, there's a concert going on. I'm out of here, man. I can't do this. So from what I
you didn't want to see Young Don?
Yeah, man. I was done. I was like, I'm good. But what I will say is that I know our colleague and my friend Travis Hobson liked the movie, which is kind of a red flag to me because Travis and I do not see eye to eye on these movies a lot of times. And I'm like, yeah, man, if you think so. So I don't know. He liked it a lot. Did you talk to anybody at Middleburg that liked this film?
That liked the film? Yeah. There were a lot of people that said it was okay, but nobody was like, this is a great film. No, I didn't. No, didn't talk to too many people like that at all.
So pretty much, man, all I can say about Armageddon is that I probably need to rewatch it. It's out in theaters this weekend. It's from Focus Features. And the folks at Focus should be happy because I wanted to talk about some of the elements and some of the things that I saw in the movie. I thought Anthony Hopkins, who plays the kid's grandfather, was really, really good because he has this. He feeds into his imagination. There's this great scene where Charles, if you saw that up to that point where he gave him the rocket and they were out
Yeah,
somewhere
yeah.
out. Yeah. So really, really liked Anthony Hopkins in his role. Jeremy Strong, of course, the very, very strict father, and Anne Hathaway, the mama, who is trying to hold it all together, and just a lot of stuff going on. But Armageddon Time, as I said, I will give it an I because I didn't see it all, so I can't really break it down the way I really want to. What I'm going to do with these next two movies. So Armageddon Time is in theaters. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I didn't see enough to recommend it or say don't see it at all. So we leave it with Charles.
I will say that it had a nice beginning to it. It was well composed, well shot. I think the cinematography was really interesting. The story, it seemed like it was going somewhere important, but I don't know because I ducked out even earlier than you because I definitely wanted to have a seat at the film. So incomplete is kind of the best I can say about it. If they had sent it to me, I would have definitely finished watching it, but I didn't get a chance to finish it.
Got you. All right, man. So up next is the psychological drama Causeway, directed by Leila Neubauer from a screenplay by Elizabeth Sanders. The film stars Jennifer Lawrence and Brian Tyree Henry, who we just talked about earlier, and it focuses on a soldier who suffers a traumatic brain injury while deployed in Afghanistan and her struggles to adjust to life back home. I saw this movie about a week and a half ago. The night I tried to get Charles to come, and Charles is like, I'm out, bro. I can't get down there. But this movie was really interesting, and it reminded me a lot of what I call the roots of Jennifer, what they call a J-Law now, Jennifer Lawrence. The movie that I first saw her in that I fell in love was a movie called Winter's Bone back in like 2000. Is that 2010? Winter's Bone? Really
maybe,
good movie.
Yeah, maybe about that.
Great debut film from her. And since then, of course, she's gone on and done Hunger Games and that franchise. And she's done stuff like Silver Linings Playbook and all of these big, big films. And she's really a good actress. And I like Jennifer Lawrence, but I was really aching to see her go back to her independent roots and play a character like the one that she plays in Causeway. And as I said in the description, man, you find out a little later on what happened to her, but she is in a hospital recuperating from, suffering from TBI, traumatic brain injury. And she's slowly coming back. And when she finally gets back, she goes back to her hometown in New Orleans, and she's trying to figure out her life. She's moving around. She's got a spotty relationship with her mama. Her brother's not there, which gets explained later in the film. And she's driving her parents' or her mama's truck, and the truck breaks down, and she has to take it to a mechanic. And the mechanic, played by Brian Tyree Henry, sees something in her, and the two of them form this really unlikely relationship. And they're spending a lot of time together. You're trying to figure out, Charles, whether these two are going to end up together. They're spending time. That question gets answered somewhere in the film. We learn more about his backstory, and it's a very, very interesting New Orleans relationship with this young woman who is desperate to try to get cleared by her doctor so she can return back to Afghanistan, and her reasoning behind why she wants to do that. While she's waiting to be cleared, Charles, she's cleaning pools. And so it's a wonderful small story. Is it the greatest film in the world? It is not. I would give it a B. I think Brian Tyree Henry is also sparkles in this movie, and he continues to surprise me, Charles, because the first time I saw him in Atlanta playing Paperboy, right? So
Paperboy, yeah.
Paperboy's a rapper. Then you see Paperboy and Sterling K. Brown, or Brian Tyree Henry and Sterling K. Brown in the movie. Then you see Brian Tyree Henry earlier this year in Bullet Train, and you see Brian Tyree Henry in Causeway. So he's building a.
Don't forget Eternals.
Oh, right. Sorry, I kind of wiped that one away. In the Eternal, see him in that one too.
But his performance was actually pretty good in Eternal. So I mean,
and what I would say about Brian Tyree Henry is that no matter what film I've seen him in, he always does something to stand out. So he's never just sort of there. He's just kind of nice dude. And as an aside, I met him at the CCA Critics' Choice Awards several years ago, right? I think it was the first year of Atlanta. And true story, I was gonna say Brian. True story, Charles. I was talking to Donald Glover. It was like doing commercial break, and we were taking a picture. And I think Lakeith Stanfield and Brian Tyree Henry were playing, right? I mean, I clearly knew they were playing, but they started wrestling at the table. And security comes and runs over there. They go, "Hey, man, we got to get these guys out of here." And I remember Donald Glover was taking a picture with me, and he stopped. He's like, "Hey, man, these are my brothers. They ain't going nowhere. Just playing, man. Relax." So that was kind of my introduction to Brian Tyree Henry, man, and Lakeith Stanfield back at that time. So, yeah, but Causeway, I think, is a good movie, man. I would give it a B. I would recommend somebody like Charles. You should watch this movie. I think you would get some enjoyment out of it. It's a wonderful return for Jennifer Lawrence back to her independent roots. Like this movie, I like those two performances maybe better than I like the movie themselves. All right, so Charles, you got anything on that, man, before we get to the last movie, which I'm very anxious to talk about, which is the Banshees of Inisherin. So anything
I'm a big Jennifer Lawrence fan, so you know this has been on my list of films that I need to see. When you called me to go see it, I was despondent that I just didn't have the strength to sit through it. But and then you got Brian Tyree Henry in it as well, so it seems like a very interesting movie to see. So I'm gonna check it out soon enough.
Nice, man. All right,
it might be tonight.
Said it again.
It might be tonight.
There you go. All right, man. And our final movie is the Banshees of Inisherin. And this black comedy drama is written and directed by Martin McDonagh. Martin McDonagh, who wrote Three Billboards in what was it? Three Billboards in Ebbing, Missouri?
Outside Ebbing, Missouri.
Outside Missouri. He did Calvary, which, Charles, if you haven't seen Calvary, you need to find that one because that speaks directly to faith and all of the other stuff. And now in the Banshees of Inisherin, which I brought up Calvary a lot because I had to go back and rewatch Calvary after I watched this movie. And you'll say, "Tim, well, why did you do that?" Well, Charles, I'm glad you asked. With the exception of Colin Farrell, he literally uses almost the same cast as that film, and he shot it in the same place. So Calvary and the Banshees of Inisherin are shot on this small little remote island somewhere in Ireland. The only difference is Calvary was kind of more of a contemporary story, where this film takes place like 100 years earlier, like in 1920s Ireland. And it tells the story of these two friends, man, who live on this remote island. And one day,
they're not friends.
Oh, they're like best friends, right? And one day he goes to kick it with his boy, and his boy goes, "I don't like you no more, man. I don't want to be friends." And so, of course, what makes this thing work so well is that he reacted like most people would react in a situation like, "What do you mean? We've been best friends for 30 years. How are we suddenly not friends?" He's like, "I don't want to talk to you no more." So it gets so bad because, you know, Colin Farrell won't leave Brendan Gleeson alone. And he tells him, because he's an accomplished violinist, he's like, "Yo, man, if you keep coming around, every time you speak to me, I'm going to cut off a finger." And he goes, "Wait, what?" So that is sort of the setup plot of the Banshees of Inisherin. But what makes this film so good is not necessarily just that story, but it's all the layers of this community. You got a corrupt cop who I was gonna say something the cop does. Let's just say he's a cop who's very abusive, but when he's home, he's just wide open. You have to read through. I don't want to tell you what it is. Colin Farrell lives with his sister who is young, like maybe in her mid-20s, but she wants to desperately get off the island. So you got everybody. There's no internet, there's no Twitter, there's no social media, there's no television or radio. So all the entertainment happens in a central pub that happens in town where everybody meets every night. So it's one of those sorts of stories that has these quirky people in the community, this subplot or this plot that's going on with these folks. There's a young boy played by I think it's Barry Keogh, who's kind of young and daft, but his father is the police officer, and he's taking a lot of abuse from his dad. So you got a lot of that stuff going on, and then you got this primary relationship with these two former friends, and the extreme, because people kept asking me, Tim, what do you think about the movie? I said it's a little extreme, Charles. When a dude is chopping off a finger and throwing it to your door, so you sitting at home and you hear a thud, and you open your door, you got blood on your door, and there's a thumb sitting down there. You like, wait, what? So the Banshees of Inisherin and Calvary, I would watch those movies. Like, I know for people who are not familiar with Calvary is probably a great watch before you see the Banshees of Inisherin, because Martin McDonagh has a certain style of storytelling, and I think he succeeds wildly with this movie. And I could clearly see. I haven't heard or haven't been reading any awards kind of predictions, but this is the kind of movie, because Three Billboards was a movie that was unlikely. That one did quite well. This one, why would this one not do as well? And Colin Farrell does some amazing work in this film to show you the degrees of when somebody says, leave me alone, and you don't leave them alone, and they show you their hand, no pun intended. When they look, Charles, when they show you your hand, it is a very, very interesting story. I was just sitting there like, wow. And as a side note, Charles, I think that was the movie I went to that I came down with COVID, because I was sick like a week after I saw this movie. So this was a COVID movie.
Yep.
Was the COVID screening. So thoughts, Charles?
Which is funny because I went to see a movie directly before that screening, and I said, oh no, I'm not going to see this one because it's going to be playing in Middleburg, and I ducked out and avoided the COVID. Haha.
Yeah, man. So,
but the Banshees of Inisherin is a very dark comedy, and right in McDonagh's wheel. Well, I think he does excellent with this film. The performances by Brendan Gleeson and Colin Farrell in this are just hilarious in name, and just all over the place. It's like, how can you go to such extremes? But Colin Farrell is extremely stupid, and well, they are both actually really, really stupid. But it's just hilarious how he plays this film out. The cinematography is gorgeous because he's on this island, and it's just animals everywhere and rolling hills, and just as a backdrop to this really ridiculous story that's happening, where I mean, all of a sudden you're just not friends anymore, and so it's just it's just incomprehensible to the one. How can you say we're not friends? And that's just, I mean, it's beautiful. I enjoyed this movie a lot. What?
Was that so unreasonable?
It's incredibly unreasonable for you to all of a sudden say, oh, we're not friends. And not even to work up to it. It's just, oh, we're not friends anymore. I don't want to talk to you anymore. You're out of my life. Yeah. If you were in New York, Manhattan, someplace like that, it would be great. But you're on this small remote island where everybody knows everybody. Everybody sees everybody on a daily basis. How can you not be friends with somebody like that?
Right. So it's funny, man. But yeah, man, the Banshees of Inisherin, I would definitely go check that movie out. That one, That one really, really worked well for me, man. And I think it's the best movie that's out this week. So, Charles, man, I got a couple of minutes left, man. We are, we have a huge blockbuster opening next week, on the 11th. And then 2 weeks after that, it'll be at Thanksgiving. I'll be in LA at, believe it or not, at the I guess the US premiere for Knives Out, Glass Onion, Knives Out, a mystery. So I'll be in LA on Monday the 14th and 15th for that one, which is interesting because I've seen this movie. This will be the third time I've seen it. So I went to the premiere in Toronto. I saw it in Middleburg, and now I'm seeing it again. So I did the review of it already. I was like, you're wasting your time sending me because I'm already in the tank for it. I think the movie is really, really well done. Charles and I interviewed Ryan Johnson at Middleburg last month for this film. Charles, you saw the film in Middleburg, right?
Yeah.
So what are you thinking about Glass Onion? I think it's Netflix's. I haven't seen Bardot, but I think it's probably Netflix's strongest entry this year for an award.
Well, I don't know about you. I'm not trying to break any embargoes or anything because I don't think they're releasing the film until Christmas time. So I'm not sure how much we can talk about it. But other than we've seen
Wait a
it,
minute. Well, I don't know. I think that date has been moved up because they're premiering it like next Monday, not this Monday coming up, but next Monday. And I think they're going to put it in theaters and it may be on Netflix at Christmas, but that movie's coming out before Christmas.
they're doing a 1 week theatrical sneak preview on the week of November 23rd, and then it'll be on Netflix December 23rd.
So they're doing it. So they're going to put it in the theaters for a week, and then you wait 3 weeks before it comes out.
Yep, go see it in the theaters, or you wait.
Wow. Okay. Well, when I wasn't talking about it, I just said it. I thought it was the strongest of the films they would promote this year, so I didn't say anything about it. I did a review that they're going to hold until it's ready to be released on Netflix. So I think they're going to probably use the review around Christmas time. But man, that's interesting to me, man. That's an interesting strategy. If they're premiering the movie now or premiering the movie in like a week and a half and then putting it in theaters like a week after that or 2 weeks after that, and then for just a week, because the week is the qualified for awards consideration.
Right.
But I'm trying to figure out, why would you put it on net? Why would you release it on Netflix so late? Like, it's going to be in theaters, and then you won't put it on your channel for a month, which is very unlike Netflix. Netflix is normally like, we're doing this. I get the 1 week part, right? I just don't get the gap between, where you're going to screen it during the week of Thanksgiving, but not put it on the channel until Christmas. I don't get it, Charles. So, but that's where we are, man. So other than that, man, any closing remarks before we get out of here?
Nope, that's it.
All right, bro. Hey, man, I know you got a trip planned this weekend. You be safe, so you can get back to us next week. Are you gonna be here on Monday?
I will be in town on Monday because of a special engagement.
Okay, so I was asking, you gonna be at the special engagement on Monday?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Woo! All right, Charles. So as we tell you guys in closing every week, please see something good at the movies. If I were you, and I think Charles would agree, I would see the Banshees of Inisherin. I would. I don't know about Armageddon Time. I ain't see it all, man. And Causeway, you can do that too. But until next week, you guys take care, man. We'll talk to you guys pretty soon. Peace.